onto the podcast. He has a great podcast called Down in the Den, and we are excited to talk about a bunch of things in Black culture, including Kevin Samuels and his, we'll call it, treatment of Black women and other issues in the community. So this is kind of an extra blackety black episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. We don't usually get this blackety black, but pull up a chair in the barber shop, grab a 40, smoke something that you enjoy, and if it's legal in your state, and enjoy this conversation. And we're going to do an episode trade, so listen closely because I'm going to end up being on his podcast after this. So it's going to be a great, exciting thing. We met on a great podcast networking app. It's a great conversation. He has great insights. I enjoyed the whole thing. It's a great conversation. Anyway, here it is. Here we go. Let's go. Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we're welcoming Shawn Marshall Marz. This is the Cameron Journal podcast. It's a place where we talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. It's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal podcast. Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are so excited to be joined by a gentleman whose name I cannot remember, but who owns Marz Entertainment, and I know that's his last name. We'll have him introduce himself in a second. We found each other on Wildcast. We're doing a little podcast episode trade, so he's going to appear here with us on the Cameron Journal podcast, and then I imagine here in due course, I'll be over there on his podcast. So, why don't you let us know who you are, introduce yourself, and tell us about your podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cameron. My name is Shawn Marshall, affectionately known as Marz, a.k.a. Marlon Beardo, the Bearded Weirdo. I am the owner and proprietor of Marz Entertainment. We have a series of shows and podcasts on that network, mainly Down in the Den, which is the start and origin of my podcast until, and it started off as more of just an entertainment podcast, but as we all know, the last couple of years has been a hotbed politically, so we've started to become more politically charged and have involved, and we also have another show on the YouTube channel, Politics as Usual, that's Politics A-Z, as we handle politics from A to Z, and I do that with a charitable organization known as CUSP, which is keeping us safe and prosperous, which goes out and gives grab bags to the homeless and goes to meetings to help us feel more secure when it comes to government in the local area. So that's just a little bit of my background. And Cameron, thank you so much. We'll definitely have you on our show as well. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, of course. I apologize for forgetting your name.
I have about 5 of them. So you can call me Shawn, you can call me Marz. I have 2 first names since it's Shawn Marshall. So you can call me Marshall, Marlon Beardo, whatever you prefer. It's fine.
Yes. So I wanted to, now that we know a little bit about your podcast, why don't you walk us through maybe some of the topics you've covered in recent episodes and what your thoughts were on them. And then we'll kind of dive into the current events of the day.
Absolutely. So recently we just interviewed, and it's going to be released Monday, the 24th, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the visual will also be available on YouTube. But we just interviewed activist, actress, author Dale McLeod, and she's very, very cool. She's a shaman, an indigenous shaman, who she just recently wrote a book talking about her mental breakdown, which she actually discovered that it was more of her discovery into her indigenous roots being from South Africa. So that was a fantastic interview that'll be released on May 24th. And then also on the Politics as Usual show, our most recent episode, we talked about some of the rulings in the Derek Chauvin trial, as well as some things going on in our local area with a lot of police shootings. So it's a very diverse group of shows ranging from everything from Star Wars television and Marvel all the way to deeply ingrained political aspects. So we go over the whole gauntlet of things.
Yeah, in our email exchanges when we were planning on this, we definitely had one of the things we wanted to talk about was the present Israel-Palestine conflict, which ended on Thursday night, May 20th. A ceasefire was declared. President Biden came out and announced that a ceasefire had been reached. But there's still controversy because much of Gaza has been leveled by Israeli bombing, and there is a Trump administration planned but needs congressional approval Israeli arms deal totaling $700 million. And so I wanted to get your thoughts. I have lots of thoughts on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but people here are used to hearing me go on about these things. So why don't you give us your perspective first, and then I'll jump in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is a subject that we certainly do plan on touching on in our show. And it's something personally, my current partner, she is Jewish. I am, I guess, just a moil, as they would call, really agnostic. I have no religious ties. So I look at everything from a people perspective. I am a proponent for the people, a fighter for the people. I live for the people. So when I see situations that I saw in this conflict, and it's been going on, since the 40s, since Israel's been established, we've been having these conflicts in Palestine. And I think in America, it's so much fear if you come out and say anything against Israel that you're automatically anti-Semitic. And I think that's something that we need to establish that that's not the case. Because you care about a people and the safety of the people doesn't mean that you hate another. There's a theory that I talk about on my show, and I call it macro government, where you start with what's good for the planet, next what's good for the people, and then ultimately what's good for the country. So the conflict going on is obviously something that's been going on since the beginning of time. But as an American, I feel that our constant giving of monies, and I understand the political game, you want to establish a foothold in the Middle East. We don't have a lot of allies over there. So having a strong Israel benefits America. But some of the travesties that we've seen over the last couple of days and weeks since this conflict began, I believe 11 days and a ceasefire has just been signed. I'm not seeing a situation where people are fighting for rights or land. I'm seeing homes being taken legally. I'm seeing women and children murdered. And that's something that no matter the conflict, is still a war crime. So it's something that I appreciate the ceasefire that President Biden has helped negotiate. I appreciate that it's a rocky ceasefire from my understanding, but it's something that we publicly, I would have appreciated a little bit more conflict, because what we're seeing in the media is not a simple conflict of rockets being thrown back and forth. I see it as a situation where we're seeing apartheid all over again, like we saw in South Africa.
No, I refer to, and people get very shocked when I say this, I refer to it as an apartheid state. I say flat out, Israel's running an apartheid state.
Absolutely.
And back in the 80s and 90s, here in the West, we really criticized South Africa and ultimately led to regime change over that. And I'm reminded of this very famous scene from The West Wing. They're doing a arms deal with a fictional nation who's very repressive and regressive, and CJ Craig is like, they are, abusing their women and beating them and all this type of thing. And, the woman she's speaking to is Black, and she said, thank God we never had to refuel in Johannesburg. Because, if we were doing an arms deal to South Africa in the 90s, people would have wanted to burn the place down. And the sad reality is that Israel gets away with running what is essentially an apartheid state, and none of the rest of the world, in fear of anti-Semitism, wants to lift a finger about it. or say this is wrong and we shouldn't allow this and we need to criticize them and all this type of thing. It's a very dicey thing. But I'm heartened by the fact that more people now are saying this is wrong against the Palestinians. I feel like the tide is turning. Do you think the tide is turning?
I wouldn't necessarily say the tide is turning, but I definitely feel it's awakening. And it's one thing, being a person of color, being an American, it's a very unique perspective because we have our own struggles, but we also are cognizant of the struggles of our brothers and sisters across the planet from every hue. And I always say, start what's good with the planet, followed by what's good for the people. And I certainly understand race is a construct. I believe it truly is a construct. But the systems that are set into place to keep people down or to keep people at a lower level are very real. So while the construct of race is completely artificial, and I do believe we are one people, regardless of our physical characteristics or regardless of our religion or creed, I certainly believe that. But I don't know if the tide is turning just yet because we still see a lot of people that are scared because they're of the fear that they're going to be labeled as anti-Semitic, especially in Hollywood. And I know a lot of people say, shut up and dribble, and we don't need our actors and our athletes to come out and make statements. They're not politicians. But at the same time, I'm not hearing enough from the politicians to say this is wrong because of that fear of anti-Semitism. And I think that's something that really needs to be established. You can be against the conflict in Palestine. You can be against this conflict in this region, but also love your Jewish brothers and sisters and love your Muslim brothers and sisters and love your Christian brothers and sisters and love your agnostic and atheists. Because regardless of if you're on the Judeo-Christian spectrum or you're atheist or you're agnostic like me, most people still preach the golden rule, do unto others as you would do unto yourself. So it's starting to get a little bit more awareness, but I think we still have a lot of work to do to really let people know what's going on.
Yes, I definitely agree. I guess I have seen and it's really just been the last couple of years, I have seen so many more people start to recognize the Palestinian side of the issue. And I remember the dark days of the 90s and all this type of thing where it was like, all Palestinians are terrorists and they're all Hamas and Hezbollah and they deserve this and all this type of thing. And it was like the narrative was very pro-Israel. And I have found it interesting in the intervening 25 to 30 years on how much the narrative has shifted over time. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's been a spark because and it's a double-edged sword with social media. My multimedia empire that I'm trying to grow is basically social media, being an influencer, social media. But there's been some good things with social media as well. And I think this exposure, when you're seeing not just what the media produces, because everyone has a cell phone, everyone has the ability to post something unedited without the influence of the media. And I think that has a big aspect. The media, as you mentioned, was very pro-Israel, very everyone in Palestine is a terrorist, and not realizing that there's just as many Christians in Palestine as there are any other religions. But now we're getting to see, I saw, I believe, a 10-year-old boy, Palestinian boy, rapping to the Eminem beat in the middle of the rubble, and it's gone viral. There was a 10-year-old girl, Palestinian girl, who's saying, I'm just 10. How am I supposed to fix this? And we saw that with George Floyd, how that footage went across the world, and we had protests all across the world. It's a powerful tool. So the media is not going to be able to control what's getting out. The truth will come to the light eventually. And I'm hoping we can get a lot more awareness out here, letting people know that, hey, you're not anti-Semitic because you're anti people having their homes stolen. You're anti having children murdered. Those are things that are just human. And I'm hoping we can get more back to the human aspect and just forget about religion and differences of that nature. And just remember that we're all human beings. we're all flesh and blood.
Well, I mean, yes, that's certainly the key. I think the one of the interesting things about that conflict, and Seth Abramson mentioned this, is much of the present this particular flare up in this conflict was very much caused by Trump's ham-handed attempts at Middle East foreign policy, headed by Jared Kushner. And they arranged a bunch of treaties and deals between Arab nations and Israel for their own future real estate dealings, and have basically isolated the Palestinians against all their neighboring Arab countries, and have basically left them out to dry, which is, I think, going to embolden Israel in the near future, despite this ceasefire, to continue with their slow roll annexation of Palestine.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the deals that Trump and anybody that's listened to my show or listened to any of my shows know we're no Trump supporters over at Marz Entertainment. We're not necessarily Biden supporters either. We're supporters of the people. And I agree wholeheartedly. The deals that were constructed by the Trump regime, as we could see from the rollout to the vaccines, to even how the pandemic was handled, to the way that that entire region handled anything, or that entire regime, I should say, handled anything, it was all about self-interest. It wasn't interest for the people. It wasn't interest for the country. It's about a long grift, as I like to call it. So yes. I am very happy to see, we just call him 45 on my show, out of office, and hopefully we'll see him in a nice pair of bracelets soon, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think, and I understand Biden being quiet. He doesn't want our allies to feel slighted in any way. But at the same time, I would have appreciated a strong public statement condemning, because anything else would have had to been condemned immediately. And I think if you can't condemn your allies and let them know you're doing wrong, what's the point of having allies?
No, that's very true. I think we're going to get to that place. But let's hop a plane from Tel Aviv back to the United States, theoretically, and let's talk about some local topics, and we're going to start with politics and then explore some other areas of particularly Black culture that I think are interesting right now. Kamala Harris. They are really trying to promote her as Biden's heir apparent if he decides not to run in 2024. Kamala Harris has, we'll say, some difficulties in the Black community. Do you think she's going to be able to overcome that?
I believe she will, ultimately, because we are a forgiving people. If we weren't, it would have been us probably in January storming the Capitol instead of Trump supporters. But you never really seen that from Black America. Mind you, we're only 13% or so of the population. But through all the travesties in our history in this country, from being taken against our will, to chattel slavery, to Jim Crow, to segregation, to systemic racism, to redlining, to Oklahoma, Tulsa, to Redwood, to never getting our 40 acres and a mule. We've never been people to storm, because unfortunately, we know our place. We know that we are not going to be let into the Capitol. We're going to be shot and killed. So Black people tend to be pretty forgiving. I have some issues with Kamala for certain, especially with her prior history in mass incarceration. Same thing with Biden. But I also am wise enough to realize that it was a different time. And it was a time where we in the Black community saw our community being ravaged by drugs and crimes. And I remember my parents voting for Reagan because he was hard on crime, and because they didn't want their kids to grow up in a crime-infested neighborhood. And that's one thing that I think the general public needs to realize about Black Americans. We want the same thing as everyone else. So I do think Kamala will be able to overcome her history with mass incarceration. Joe Biden certainly did, but she's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take this 4 years, and she's going to have to put proof to pen and literally show some legislation because she is a woman, and we've seen a Black president before. We've seen a white woman president, which I never thought would happen. And she has a lot of views on both sides that really don't care for her and may find her disingenuous in some ways. So I believe she can overcome, but it's going to have to be a lot of work, a lot of legislation, and a lot of proof of pudding, because she incarcerated a lot of African Americans and broke up a lot of families with some of the things she did when she was in power in her state.
Well, and I think one of the issues, I was an early Kamala Harris supporter. And one of the things that I always argued with people about that people don't seem to understand is when you are the attorney general of your state, you are stuck enforcing the laws that are on the books, whether you like them or not. And part of the problem, particularly in California, with its 3 strikes, you're out system and all this type of thing, is that she was very much kind of stuck with California's regressive policies. And that, I think, was part of the problem, is that she was stuck with the laws on the book she had at the time. The state AG doesn't get to legislate as much as they might want to. And that's something that I think people are not mindful of when having a conversation about her record as Attorney General for California.
Absolutely. And we see that. And there's also choices, because we see, the attorney general in the Breonna Taylor case. They also have some choices. You're absolutely right. They have to enforce the laws on the books, but they also have some choices on what to prosecute, what not to prosecute, what to go through. So I'm not holding that against her, because those were the laws on the books. She was enforcing her laws, but I can certainly see where a lot of people will have some concerns. But at the end of the day, I think it's really going to depend on who the right side of the aisle elects to put as an opponent. Because if it's Trump again, or a Trump protege, or Donnie Jr. or anybody, I think she's going to have a good shot, because we've already seen what that side can do. And I've never seen in 4 years the country take such a drop, not only just as far as our standings across the world, but just even as a place to live as an American. So she has a good chance. If Biden and her do a really good job over these next 4 years, and so far I don't have too many complaints. Of course, I'm critical of some things, but I think she has a distinct possibility of being an heir apparent. I know Biden says he's going to run again in 4 years, but I think that's really presumptive of us to think at that age that he's going to be able to do so. So we'll see. We'll definitely see.
Yeah, no, I think that is, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's a nice idea to kind of calm everybody down right now, but the reality is we have elected a 78-year-old man president, and he is going to be 82, 83 by inauguration day. And I think as the presidential candidate, as the presidential race heats up after midterms next year, I would not be at all surprised if, by Iowa filing deadlines that, all of a sudden Biden announces and says he's not running, and then throws his weight behind Kamala. I would not be at all surprised.
Oh, me either. Me either. And
yeah.
To be completely honest, and we can put this on the record, I think that was the plan the entire time. Get someone that is acceptable to the palate of America. Get someone who's, as you notice, she introduces him in every press conference. I've never seen a vice president be so in front of the camera as I've seen with Kamala. So I definitely feel there's a lot of grooming taking place, and I think they want to keep people comfortable that he's in charge. And I do believe the final word comes down to President Biden, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if, like you said, by year 2, he announces, okay, I'm not rerunning, and really starting to put all the energy behind Kamala to make her the new face of the party.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I since entertainment is your thing, I couldn't not dive into some entertainment topics
Let's
for
do it.
sure. Um, so have you heard of this new sort of dating advice du jour personality named Kevin Samuels?
Oh, yes. Yes. We've actually, uh,
I have so many questions. I need you to tell me everything
I
because I
gotcha.
literally he sounds like the Black Jordan Peterson, and I am not okay. Like, please give me your opinion because I have many thoughts.
Certainly. So we actually, our most recent show on Down and Den After Dark is a all male show where we talk about subjects from mental health. And our most recent episode was on Kevin Samuels.
Oh, how do
So
I get on this podcast?
yeah, hey, I'll send you an invite. We'd love to have you. So I'm so glad you asked me about this guy. So this guy, and what's your rating? Did you rate it? Can I curse? I want to always ask first.
Oh no, we are you kidding? I just recorded a podcast 2 weeks ago with a guy we were doing talking about growing up evangelical and all that type of thing. And we had every word we talked about very uncomfortable subjects. Curse away.
Okay. All right. And it's not going to be too blue, but he's a jackass. He is a jackass. And what he's doing is preying on the insecurity of Black women. And he is using that to pump himself up. And let me tell you, I don't know if you know the backstory of this guy, but he started off in
I've
marketing.
just started learning. So I follow this comedian called Tremo, and he did an impression of him, and I'd never really heard of him before. So I started like watching some YouTube videos and looking into him, but I don't know much about his background. He sounds like it's like, okay, this is Jordan Peterson with Dan Bilzerian, but Black. That's not
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
Like,
He's a hot mess in so many ways. And I really wish women would stop putting stock into the things he says and just ask regular people. This guy started off in marketing. He's not a psychiatrist. He doesn't have a PhD. He's not a relationship guru. He started off in marketing for a failed company. And then he ended up doing consultations for fashion and things. He really, the word on the street, and a lot of people, and of course he's saying that's not the case, but they said his real start, he would wear really nice suits and stand in front of high-end stores in Atlanta in the Burkhead region and try to talk to people and get them to listen to his site. And he's been doing his YouTube channel for a while now, but it's really just taken off over the last 6 months to a year because of the hot takes he has on high-value men and women finding a high-value man. So he'll have a woman call, and the first thing he does, he doesn't talk about character. He doesn't talk about person. He doesn't talk about how tall are you? How much do you weigh? How many kids do you have? Oh, you'll never find a man. Next caller. And he just brutalizes these women, and people watch it for their entertainment. And I am all for protect women, and specifically protect Black women, because I come from a Black woman, and I was married to a Black woman, and I love Black women. I love women of every color, but I feel Black women since slavery times, Black women had to be stronger. They fed the babies of the slave masters with their own breast milk. They were bred like animals with the biggest Black guy and the strongest Black woman to make a super slave. These are facts. These are things that are well established. And even now, Black women have to be tougher than every other race. Black women die the most giving birth than any other race because they don't believe Black women feel pain. So for him to add on and put psychological pain, I'm totally against it. And I feel he needs to be shut down, because you can be honest with people. And some of the people, and I'll tell you, Cameron, some of the people, if you listen to a show, are truly, really insane when it comes to their expectations, but you still don't have to be so harsh for entertainment, clicks, and subscribes. You don't have to do that. And that's what I think. I think he takes the pain of Black women and he tries to profit off of it. And I'm totally against that.
Well, I mean, that was certainly my impression. I mean, because I watched a clip of one of his shows because that was about all I could stand. And I mean, and it's everything. It's sexism, it's ageism. I mean, every ism just seems to be out there. And he has his thoughts on women, quite frankly, I think are just out and out degrading. I mean, I think that's the only way to kind of put that. I think his thoughts on men are equally as bad, in a different way. And I think the thing I resent the most, even though I think there is some truth to it, is he kind of has reduced human relationships down to financial transactions.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's exactly what he's done. And I understand, being single out there can be rough and some expectations. I think you could simply say, ma'am, you may need to adjust your expectations. And this is why. Generally, a man with this amount of money, is going to want a person of this type of age, this type of stature, but he doesn't have to say, oh, you'll never do that. You'll never do this. You'll never get this. You'll never be, set expectations, but be fair. And you can do both. And he doesn't do that. He's trying to be as mean as possible. I call it the Simon Cowell effect. Let me be as mean as possible. Even if I'm saying truth to what I'm saying, it doesn't matter because your delivery, your bedside manner is so awful. Instantly, you're going to get a lot of negative criticism on how he's doing it. And he'll say, oh, I've had so many success stories and things of that nature. Maybe so. But
where are the receipts? Like, where are the receipts? Like,
I haven't seen a receipt. I haven't seen anyone call back on the show and say, thank you for criticizing me and making me cry. But because of that pain you caused, now I'm in love and I'm expecting a beautiful family. Thanks. I've never seen it. So while he says hundreds, if not thousands of women are in his DMs thanking him, I've yet to see him present a receipt. And if so,
yeah, like where are the receipts? Where are the tags? I'm like, did you buy that at the store or the swap meet? Like we inquiring minds want to know. Yeah. Why do you think he's popular? I don't understand the appeal. I mean, and now he's kind of getting on some of the more popular Black podcasts and all this type of thing. I don't understand. And it's all the podcasts hosted by men. I have not seen him on a podcast hosted by women.
And you probably won't. I don't think you're going to see him on The View anytime soon or anything that's hosted by majority of women. I think it's a double-sided reason why he's becoming so popular. Number one, it's entertainment. So a lot of what he says, I believe, is entertainment. I don't even think he believes it, but he knows it's going to get a reaction. And the old Hollywood saying, there's no such thing as bad press. Any press is good press. So he's getting attention. The second thing, I think it's a lot of toxic masculinity out there in the industry. A lot of toxic masculinity. So the people that are having them are generally known. There's a popular podcaster and former hip hop artist, Joe Budden, who has a network. He's had him. Well, he's known for toxic masculinity, verbal abuse, physical abuse. So they're going to be two peas in the same pod. They're going to link. They're going to like that. I've seen him on Vlad or the No Jumper podcast, another popular podcast. But once again, same kind of guy.
All hosted by men who've been like arrested for domestic abuse, have known to cheat on their wives, have children with other women out of wedlock. I mean, it's just like
exactly. So it's kind of like
because these are the people we call for relationship advice. Like this is who we need to get relationship advice from. Yeah,
and it's like the turd, seeing which turd is the smellier turd. You're still both turds, and that's how I feel with Kevin Samuels. And obviously I'm nowhere on the Joe Budden or Vlad or any of these people. But if today, with my humble entertainment network, I wouldn't have him on my show. If he called me today, I wouldn't have him on my show because I just can't respect him. Not only as a man, I can't respect him as a human being because I just was not raised like that to try to deconstruct people. I was raised to try to uplift people. So yeah, I'm very anti Kevin Samuels. I feel there's another a black speaker and activist, Dr. Umar Johnson, who's pretty much waged a war against him. And I do not agree with everything Dr. Umar Johnson. This is not an endorsement for him in any way. But what he said about how he wants to hurt women and how he wants to deface and demean women, I agree 100%. And it has to stop. And unfortunately, women are the biggest supporters. And I don't know if it's, father issues or something, but I don't know why any woman would want to call and just be destroyed by this guy on a public scale that's going to go viral. And that's what's happening, unless they just want to go viral for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I mean, but I also, I mean, conversely, which is kind of a transition to another topic. You have people like Wendy Williams. Being mean is her whole brand.
Sure.
Has been for 35 years. Like,
sure.
That's been her whole shtick, is just like, how many celebrities can we piss off today? Sort of thing.
Sure. You can even say Joan Rivers before her. There's money in being mean because people want to see your reaction. People enjoy that. Like I said, Simon Cowell, yeah. I don't know what he does. I know he can't sing or dance or write music, but I know he's made hundreds of millions of dollars from being mean and judging other people. People like it.
Yes. Well, and there is a certain amount of, being in a group and watching, someone be shamed or whatever have you. There's a human thing to that, sort of thing that I think is quite weird and awkward, but it's very primal, kind of unavoidable, I think. So in terms of other kind of interesting celebrity stuff, I have been a long time watcher. I don't know if you ever watched this show. I've been a long time watcher of Braxton Family Values. And I think that show has all but ruined that family. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but I think that show is about torn that family to pieces.
Yeah, I've watched the clips. I'm a 90s baby, so and my brother, God rest his soul, was 10 years older than me. So I grew up listening to Toni Braxton. Even though I wasn't quite of age, I grew up listening to Toni Braxton. So I was a big fan. And Tamar and her sisters. I've watched a few clips of the show, but it seems, once again, I don't get a thrill out of seeing people argue and fight. It's not anything that I've ever been a fan of. And unfortunately, reality TV, there's so very little reality that goes on. And I know producers manipulate footage to fit into storylines, but I agree wholeheartedly. That poor family seems more disconnected than ever because of the show. And it's not for everyone, but I understand it's a quick way to make money. Everybody wants to be a Kardashian. That show's been on, 20 years, 10 years, something like that.
Yep.
So everyone wants to get in that easy reality money. I would never be on a reality show just because, once again, unless you have final edit, you can't control the storyline that's going to go out there. And I think any of us, if we got recorded on our worst moments and was presented to a national audience, we'd probably hide under a rock and never want to show up. So I agree. It's been rough on that family, especially, I believe, Tamar. I know she's had a couple of suicide attempts, relationship issues, things of that nature. So I just send nothing but positive vibes out to that family. They're a very talented family. But please, for your own good, step away from the reality, focus on your music, focus on just living, because reality TV isn't for everyone.
I think for them, going on reality TV was probably, for the health of their interpersonal relationships with themselves, was probably about the worst decision they ever made. And I get why they did it. Like, Tony needed the money, Trina needed the money. Like, I get everybody needed to get paid. And that show has launched a couple businesses launched. Tamar Braxton's relaunched her whole career. Like, I get that everybody has gotten paid from it, but I think based upon actual life events, they now all low-key kind of hate each other. And I don't think that would have happened if they had never gone on TV.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard to argue. I mean, I think every family has different dynamics, and you don't know. We know what we've seen, but we don't know the 30 years prior to being on TV, their interpersonal relationships. It seems like there was a lot of envy, a lot of jealousy in that family. And that alone, I always feel envy can soil any type of relationship. And then having it broadcast and having those insecurities broadcast and things that you don't know about yourself revealed to a national audience, it's hard to come back from that. I haven't seen any of the shows like The Bachelor or any of the relationship shows where you see 15 years later, these people are happily married. And it's tough to have your deepest, darkest secrets and your interpersonal relationships broadcast out for the whole world. It's tough.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I think, I mean, I kind of have a weird relationship. Like, I feel like with reality TV, I would like the platform, but I also, you know, if it's convenient for the show for you to be a villain, that kind of becomes your brand. Absolutely. And you don't control that, you know. Absolutely. And so it's kind of one of those things of like, would I do it? I know myself enough to know I probably would say yes, but I also agree there's a lot of risks.
It's a lot of risks. I don't think I would do something like that. Now, something like Netflix has a series, The Circle, and I don't know if you've ever seen that. I'm a huge fan of The Circle, but you're not up there with your family. You get to make your own. You don't actually hang out with any of the people. It's a social media experiment where you make a profile. You can be yourself. You can catfish, and you really just have to have a popularity contest. So something like that, I would absolutely be on. But something where my family is involved, there's a reason why they say money and blood don't mix. It's a recipe for disaster. A recipe.
Well, I don't think I'd want to spend that much time around my family, to be quite honest with you. So I would not want to be on television. That's way too many hours of shooting with them in the same room. So we're good. I like the ability to be able to get up and leave expeditiously at opportune moments. So let's also, while we're here, I'm a bit curious. This is kind of more of an existential question, but I think it's a very important one. The Black community. I have said this for a while and people think I'm crazy. So I wanted to get your take on it. I think we have a major problem in the Black community with gay people, particularly gay and bisexual men. And I think it is 50 feet past time we do something about it. And I see absolutely no movement to create a more open and accepting environment for gay and bisexual men in the Black community. What do you think it would take to begin to start to make that possible?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's something
that's what we do here. We ask weird questions about stuff.
No, it's a great question. It's not even a weird question. My sister, who I love to death, she is a lesbian, out and proud and beautiful, strong lesbian. Some of my best friends are homosexual, and it doesn't bother me personally. Never has, even when I was young. But that's me personally. I can say in the Black community, homophobia runs rampant.
Yes.
And there's a reason behind that. It's not a justified reason, but there's a reason behind that. You'll also see it in a lot of Caribbean islands that are mostly Black people, where you will see homophobia. Jamaica in particular, where it's just
it's really bad.
It's really bad, and it's completely unacceptable. But I think what's going to have to take is, and it's the same thing I feel with racism, it's going to have to be a situation where they age out. People of my generation, and I'm in my late 30s, but people of my generation and younger are way, way more open to the LGBTQIA community, way more open. So it's going to take a situation where people of my parents' generation, the boomers, are starting to kind of go off the map and no longer have the power. And then open dialogue to see where this, because phobia to me is arachnophobia. I don't like spiders. That's a reasonable reason why I don't like spiders. They might bite me and it might be a tarantula. It's no reason to have homophobia. You're not going to catch gay from having a gay friend or being friends with someone gay or having a gay person in your room. It's not something that can be caught. It's not something that's inherently wrong. It's not something that's evil. And I think a part of it with the Black community is religion. We weren't given much when we came to this country. We were stripped from our language. We were stripped from our religion. We were stripped from our nationality. Most Black people don't know where we come from in Africa. We just say, oh, I'm African American. Where? I don't know. The only thing that we were given was religion. And so most Black people, regardless of where they're from in this country, originate in the South, the Bible. And when you're from the South, I'm from Virginia, which was the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War. It is the South is technically where the South begins. Born and raised in Virginia, and it's a very religious area, and so are the states below us and across from us, all across the South. So even when we came from North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, and went across the country and settled and raised families in California and all across the country, those deep-rooted beliefs traveled with them. So grandma told you it was wrong. Grandpa told you it was wrong. Your pastor at your church told you it was wrong. So those deeply seated communities it's almost like hurt people. So when you see a race of people that was hurt so much by the country that we have lived and fought for, hurt people. So when they have their child come out to them and say, Mom, I'm gay, or Mom, I'm bi, or Mom, I'm a lesbian, or Mom, I want to be transgender, whatever it may be, I think for most Black parents, they're like, damn, you're already Black. Now you have another strike against you. Now it's going to be that much harder. And then it's just ignorance. There's a lot of ignorance on what being a person on that spectrum means. So it's going to take communication. It's going to take a reconciliation from Black people to say, this is not right. This behavior of hating someone just because of their sexuality is no different and no more ludicrous than hating someone because of the color of their skin or because they have curly hair. It doesn't matter. So it's just going to be more communication. I think shows like Pose, which is my favorite show on TV, has done a great thing from opening the eyes of people, but it's going to take a lot of work with all people just kind of holding hands and not kumbaya, but saying, hey, let's talk about these irrational reasons why you hate someone just because of how they feel or who they love. One of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite rappers, Jay-Z, he said, what you eat doesn't make me shit. So it shouldn't matter who I sleep with. What does it have to do with me? If you're not sleeping with me, I don't care. To be completely honest, I really don't care. So that's something that I will admit it is definitely prevalent in the African-American community, but I have seen some progress. And I think it's just going to be a situation where the younger, more open, more woke people are now in power, and now they're the ones that are going to be raising the kids, and they'll teach their kids the right way, things that we may not have been taught.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned the religious aspect, because I had said a while back, I said the reality is that, you know, if we're going to get a change on this topic, it's got to be led by the Black church. Good luck with that. Because I just don't foresee that, you know, moving forward actionably anytime soon. I think the religious aspect is when on this topic, I feel like it is the only topic that matters
Yeah.
because, even if you are, but like so many other cultures, like even if you are yourself not religious, most of your family probably is. And then the Black community, the church still runs shit. It's where people gather. It's where community is built. It's where most, probably until literally this generation, where most Black kids did most of their growing up. I think that's changed with millennials who are less churched. But it has such a profound influence that I don't think this topic is going to be able to move forward until the church decides to be a little bit more open.
Yeah.
And I think in a couple of major cities, there are some peaks through the cracks, but there's still a long way to go on that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I also feel the younger generation, my generation or younger, we're also stepping away from, you're seeing in droves statistically, stepping away from traditional Christianity.
Yes.
And people ask me about it. I was thankful that I wasn't, like many of my friends and family, I wasn't forced into religion growing up. I was allowed to make that decision for myself. And so
lucky you.
Yeah, it was a blessing. I think the first time I went to church was in year 2000, maybe. And that was literally to cover my bases just in case the world ended. I said, let me go here just in case they said the world's going to blow up in 2000. I'll take my chances. And when the clock struck 12 and I was still here, I was like, okay, that's good enough for me. And that's why I say agnostic. I'm not an atheist because I don't believe something can be made from nothing. Even the Big Bang itself might be a different type of creation, but also the traditional Judeo-Christian religions, they don't hold true to me because you can literally go back and say, okay, they got this aspect from ancient Egypt and they got this aspect from Greece and they got this aspect from here. So I think as more people are awakening and going away from those religious aspects, and I always tell, like I said, as African-American, they gave us the worst food. Black people had to make chitlins into a delicacy. They gave us the worst health care. They gave us the worst shelter. They gave us the worst clothes, but they're going to give us something so good in religion. Doesn't make sense to me. So I think as more people start to look into more indigenous religions and starting to look into themselves and more spiritual aspects instead of religion, we'll start to see that growth, but it's just not fast enough for me in my taste.
Yeah, I mean, I am amazed at how many, in the LGBTQIA community, how many Black dudes do that sort of thing and they're just not out about it. Like it was literally last year when I met like the first, it was a Black dude from Chicago actually, that was actually like out, like went about saying he was gay publicly. I'm like, well, that you're like, there's like practically none of you here. Like, like this never happens. Like most of the time it's like they're married, they're single, they're on the down low, all this sort of thing. And I just find that not only does it do nothing for my bisexual dating prospects, but I just find it incredibly frustrating because I know it's all cultural. There's no other reason other than, well, that's just simply not done here, or if you come out, your whole family's going to stop talking to you. And then what do you have in a world that is already hard to survive in anyway? Like, I find it very depressing. I find it very depressing because I know this has active human effects on people and it destroys marriages. And, there was even a story a couple years ago about a pastor realizing he had a problem with homosexuality when there was an outbreak of AIDS among the women in his church because their husbands were having unprotected sex with other men. And all of a sudden, these wives were coming up having AIDS that they'd gotten from their husbands.
Yeah,
and it's just like, we need to have a reckoning on this. Like, we can't go on like we have been. It's killing people, literally.
Yeah, and it has been, and the down low phenomenon is nothing new. It's nothing new at all. And, there's been books, there's been films, there's been lectures, there's been documentaries, and it just goes back to self-hatred. And that's why I always tell people, love yourself first. Love all of you, the nooks, the crannies, the good, the bad, the ugly, because they encompass who you actually are. So I tell all my brothers and sisters from the LGBTQIA community, don't be afraid. Fear is going to be something that holds you back from greatness. And I know it can be rough thinking that you may lose your family, because I've heard the story, I've seen the stories. It may be tough. A perfect story, my sister, she came out to me, I want to say in year 2009, maybe. And she was living in New York. I was here in Virginia. And she sent me a text. She said, hey, I got a new apartment. I want to send you a plane ticket. I want you to come down here. One thing, I live with my girlfriend. And I was like, all right, cool. Is she single? Because I'm thinking, women call their friends girlfriends. So I'm like, cool. Is she single? I'm single. What she look like? Send me a picture. And she was like, no, I have to tell you, it's my girlfriend. I'm at the time she said I'm bisexual, and now she's fully came out. And I said, oh, okay. And she was like, I was so afraid that you were going to disown me. And I'm like, why? I don't care. But that is the expectation in the Black community, that if you're going to come out, you're going to be shunned. And in some cases, that's very true. Probably in most cases, to be completely honest. But at the end of the day, I don't see how you can hate anything that comes from you. And
I ran into that myself. I didn't meet my father and his family till I was 23. And I think I was probably 25 or 26 before I finally went down to Alabama to meet everybody. And he didn't tell them ahead of time. So I just kind of showed up. That was a whole scandal. I'm kind of like that. You just made this 10 times harder. Thank you for nothing. Again, anyway, I'm not bitter. And there was this cousin of mine that I really connected with while we were there, because we were kind of closer in age, and we talked about cars, and he was in school. We went to this cool cigar bar. We hung out, all this type of thing. He friended me on Facebook, and I there's a lot of different gay pages that I've liked as the years have gone by. I used to work in the adult industry, so I have lots of people from that industry who know me, all this type of thing. And in his feed, it came up that I'd commented on some gay page, and he messages me, and he's kind of like, do you like this page? Are you gay? And I'm like, well, no, I'm bi. I actually am pretty heteroromantic. I tend to date women. In fact, I think I had a girlfriend at the time. And I'm kind of like, but I've been a part of that page for a long time. I've been in the community for a long time. I've been bi since I was 18, so this is part of my world. And he defriended me and refused to speak to me. And he was the only person in that whole time that I'd really connected with and started to kind of have a relationship with. And it really sucked, because I kind of knew that was going to happen, sort of thing. So I wasn't sad. I was sad because it happened, but I wasn't surprised. I was like, well, I was anticipating this would come up and be a problem. So we can't be too sad, because it's not like I didn't know what the potentiality of it was. But that's, I just feel that's an area I feel like we just have to make a lot of progress as a community right away. No time to wait. Got to get moving on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so proud of the younger generation. I do think this country is in good hands when the 16, 17, 18-year-olds of today get into power, because they're so much smarter than I was growing up. They're so much wiser. They're so much more open. They're so much more exposed. I'm seeing more and more kids coming out there and expressing themselves fearlessly. And I love it. I love it, because I think if everyone can be their most authentic self, the world could be in such a better place.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I do want to find out, we're coming to the close, but I do want to find out, how did you get into podcasting and all this sort of thing? What was your first spark of creativity in this area?
Oh man, that's a great question again. So and I'm glad you asked. It's really weird, because growing up, I grew up in the 90s, and I was a big fan of Jay Leno and David Letterman and Arsenio Hall and all these talk shows. And I knew I wanted to be famous. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I can't sing or dance. I don't really like acting. I like ad lib, but I don't really like acting. But I knew I wanted to be famous. I just didn't know what for. And my brother was the funniest person I've ever met. Like, living in my house was just joy because everyone's laughing, and one of those deep laughs where you're crying and you may pee on yourself a little bit, but it's
Yes.
totally worth it. So he was the funniest person in the world, and he would say these jokes, and they were just so sharp. So I think at about 10 years of age, I said a joke back to him because my brother was a really big guy, about 6'2", 340, football star, huge, and I'm the opposite, very small. And I said a joke about, hey, how do you wipe with those little T-Rex arms? And it just made everyone laugh. And that feeling was like crack. I was like, oh, I can make people laugh. That's awesome. So then I started telling jokes in class and started doing comedy shows and talent shows and things of that nature. Then I went to college and became a mass communication major. And I knew I wanted to be on TV, but I didn't know what I wanted to be in TV. And I had some opportunities for local news, but it wasn't for me. And the pay was trash living in a bottom 40 market. So I kind of gave up on those dreams and went into corporate America and did well for myself and was living a regular life, but I still felt something was missing. That creativity, as you mentioned, was missing. So I stumbled across the Anchor app one day, and I had started listening to Deezus and Mero podcast, the Bodega Boys. I started listening to that, and I was like, wow, these guys are great. These guys are funny. I could probably do this if I had some friends that were interested in doing it. Of course, I couldn't find anybody that was interested in doing it with me. So I said, F it, I'm just going to go solo. Started my podcast. My very first episode was December 31st, 2019. Didn't really have a topic, didn't really have a theme. I just had the name of a show and recorded it. And January happened and my favorite basketball player died. And kind of just was like, I'm not going to do this. And then a pandemic happened. And around March, they sent me home from work, even though I was still blessed with a job. And I had a lot more time. 2 hours out of my commute has now been cut off. And I said, let me start getting into this podcasting. And so March of 2020, I really started going full steam, putting content out there. And I started to get views and likes and grows. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Let me invest in a little bit more equipment. And then I started getting interviews. And then one of my favorite comic book writers, Kevin Cuffey and Bob France, they do a comic book called Metal Shark Bro. I liked some of their photos, and they were like, hey, we'll give you an interview. I was like, really? I'm just a little guy. And so I did an interview, and it went really well. And then I met some agents who was like, hey, we heard your interview. Can you interview this musician? Okay, cool. And it started to grow really, really quickly. And now we have 4 or 5 shows and a small network on YouTube and the podcast. And it just really grew over the last year. But that's how I started. It was something where it was always, I knew I wanted to be in the entertainment industry in some way. Living in Virginia is really hard if you're not in New York or California. It can be really different to find those opportunities. But right now, you can literally, with a phone and 5 minutes, can make a podcast. And there's a million podcasts out there. But doing that and doing the visual aspects has just been so fulfilling to get rid of that vacancy I felt as far as creativity. So now it's something that, I do usually about 10 hours of content a week on different channels. And it's just something I really love.
No, that's quite impressive. You had much faster exponential growth than I did. I did the first iteration of my talk show in 2014, which was my first podcast. And then I chucked it and went back to work for a couple years. And then when we pivoted to the Cameron Journal in about the same time, well, a year before you started your show, all this type of thing, I just kind of started the podcast again. The audience has been different this time than it was in the old talk show days. Because back then I was doing blog posts and interviews and YouTube, 2 videos a week and a podcast every week, which was just insanity. 2 years of that. So congratulations. I've been doing this in some form since 2014, and you have grown faster in a year than I have in 7. So that's a testament to your hard work, and the quality of what you
awesome.
do.
You're awesome, Cameron. Like I said, we all are riding our own horse. We're all on different paths, and so, like I said, you're fantastic. You have a fan here.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, we're about to wrap up. So this is the part of the show where we do plugs, where you tell us where we can find you online and interact with you.
Thank you so much. Well, yes, you guys can find the Down in the Den audio podcast available on Spotify, Anchor, FM, Apple Podcasts, or what is it, iPod, whatever it's called, Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, I'm everywhere. You can check out the YouTube channel on Marz, which is MARZ Entertainment, just like it's spelled. Or you can just simply type in Down in the Den and you'll see my handsome face. And you'll see under Marz Entertainment, you'll see all my shows. There's Down in the Den, the visual aspect, which is just the visual version of my podcast. You'll also see Down in the Den After Dark, which is the show with just kind of men talking about subjects. We have Politics as Usual with the team at Cuss. And I also have a cooking show called Cooking with Marz. Where my second favorite passion is cooking, where you just see me cooking. So I'm there. You can find me on Instagram under Marz_entertainment. The Twitter is Shawn930. And where else are we at? I think that's it. Yeah, those are the places. So get at me. I'm very open. If you send me a message, I will respond. I'm not stuck up at all. Also, for business opportunities, the Instagram is DITD_studios, so just Down in the Den Studios. If you want to reach me for business opportunities, you can reach me there.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. I look forward to joining you over there at a time in the future. And thank you for talking with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.